The trap in the dark forest. The night was quiet, the forest breathing with shadows and whispers. A human named Daniel walked slowly, carrying a lantern in one hand and a bundle of ropes in the other. He was a hunter, not for sport, but for survival. The forest was dangerous, full of strange animals that sometimes came too close to his cabin. He needed food and he needed safety, so he set his traps carefully, never wasting a step. The moon hung low, pale and silver, spreading light between the branches. Daniel crouched, near an old tree where he had set a snare earlier that day. He checked the rope, expecting maybe a rabbit or a fox, but when he lifted the lantern closer, his heart froze. There was something inside the trap, something alive, but not any animal he had ever seen. The figure was tangled in the rope, struggling weakly. It was shaped like a woman, but not fully human. Her skin shimmered faintly, almost like starlight, and her long hair glowed faint green under the moon. Her eyes were wide, glowing like embers. She looked terrified. Daniel blinked, his breath catching. He had heard stories of strange beings wandering deep in the woods. Aliens, they called them. Visitors from another world. Some people said they were dangerous, others said they were fragile and hunted. He never believed those stories fully, until now. The alien woman tried to move, the rope cutting into her wrist. She let out a sharp sound, a mix of fear and pain. Daniel stepped back, unsure what to do. If he left her, she would die. If he cut her free, she might attack him. His heart raced. She spoke suddenly, her voice trembling, the words broken but clear enough to understand. "Please, don't hurt me," she whispered. Her accent was strange, but Daniel understood. For a moment he said nothing. His lantern flickered, shadows dancing on her face. She looked young, weak, and frightened. He noticed scratches on her arm. Blood, shining dark under the moon. She must have been running before falling into his trap. Daniel's mind spun. The trap was meant for wild animals, not for her. He cursed under his breath, feeling guilt wash over him. Slowly, he lowered the lantern and raised both his hands, showing he had no weapon. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. His voice was steady, but inside he was nervous. "You are caught by mistake." "Let me help." The alien woman shook her head quickly, her eyes still burning with fear. "Humans. They kill," she whispered. Her voice was filled with dread. Her body shook as she tried to pull away from him. But the rope held tight. Daniel knelt on the ground, keeping his distance. "Not all," he said quietly. "Not me." The forest around them was still, except for the sound of her ragged breathing. An owl called somewhere in the distance, and the wind rustled the leaves, but the silence between them was heavy. He could see the fear in her eyes, fear that came from stories, maybe from real experiences with others. He realized in that moment that she was not a monster, not a threat. She was simply trapped like a bird caught in a net. Taking a slow breath, Daniel pulled a knife from his belt. The alien's eyes widened, and she let out a frightened cry. "No, no, please," she begged. Daniel shook his head quickly, keeping his hands where she could see. "It's to cut the rope," he explained. "Not to hurt you." He moved closer, inch by inch. She watched every movement, her chest rising and falling fast, her glowing eyes filled with tears. Daniel felt something tighten inside him. Sympathy, something deeper than fear. With careful hands, he slid the blade against the rope. The fibers snapped one by one, each. Sound made her flinch, but she didn't pull away this time. Finally, with one last slice, the rope gave way and she was free. The alien woman staggered back, rubbing her wrist. She was weak, but still ready to flee. Her glowing eyes stayed on him, unsure whether to trust or run. Daniel did not move closer. He simply set the knife aside on the ground and stepped back. "You're free now," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. She looked at him, breathing hard. Her body trembled. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Finally, she whispered, Why help me?" Daniel swallowed, not sure how to answer. He didn't know himself. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was compassion. Maybe it was something else he couldn't explain. He only said, Because you were afraid of me. The alien lowered. Her gaze confused. She had expected cruelty, maybe death, but instead she found kindness, and that frightened her more. The forest remained quiet, the trap broken, the night deep and cold. Two strangers stood in silence, one human and one alien, both not knowing what tomorrow would bring. But in that moment, under the silver moon, a story began, the fear of escape. The forest night had grown colder and the alien woman stood trembling. Her wrist was raw from the rope, and her glowing eyes flicked from the knife on the ground to the human who freed her. Daniel did not move closer. He only kept the lantern raised, its warm light casting shadows between them. Go if you want, Daniel said quietly. His voice was calm but carried weight. I won't stop you, she blinked, confused. Her people had told her humans never let prey escape. They trapped, they caged, they sold. Yet here was one who cut her free. The thought made her chest tighten with fear, because if kindness was real, it was something more dangerous than cruelty. Cruelty was expected, but kindness could weaken her heart. She staggered a step back, her legs shaking. The forest behind her was endless and dark. She thought about running, but her body was too weak. She had been hiding for days with no food, no water, and every sound in the trees reminded her of hunters. If she fled now, she would collapse, and death would find her. Daniel noticed her weakness. He set his lantern on a rock, then pulled a small leather flask from his belt. Slowly, he placed it on the ground and pushed it toward her. Water, he said simply. Take it. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion burning in her face. What if it was poison? What if he wanted her to drink and fall? But her throat burned with thirst. She hesitated, then dropped to her knees, snatched the flask and sniffed it. The smell was plain, water. Her lips touched the rim, and before she could stop herself, she drank. The liquid was cool, sliding down her throat like life itself. When she finished, she looked back at him sharply. Why? She whispered again. Why give me this? Daniel met her gaze. His own eyes were tired, shadowed with loneliness. Because you need it, he replied. His voice was steady, not demanding thanks, not asking for trust, just truth. She hugged the flask close, her hands trembling. A part of her still wanted to escape, but another part wondered if this human was different. She had heard that humans could be both monsters and protectors. Was he the second kind? Her wound throbbed, and she touched her arm where blood still oozed slowly, Daniel noticed. He took a step forward, pulling a strip of cloth from his bag. Let me wrap that, he said. Her body tensed instantly, and she bared her teeth. No, she hissed. Her voice was low, sharp. Her heart hammered. She thought if he touched her, it would be the end. She backed away, clutching her injured arm. Daniel raised both hands, stopping where he was. Fine, he said softly. You can do it yourself. He placed the cloth on a stone near her and stepped back. The alien stared at him, waiting for a trick, but no trick came. He truly stepped away, letting her choose. Slowly, she crawled forward and picked up the cloth. Her body was shaking, but she wrapped the wound as best as she could. Each move was clumsy, and the cloth stained quickly, but it held as she tied the knot. Her glowing eyes lifted to him. He had not moved. He only watched, silently, like a man guarding, not a hunter waiting to strike. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the wind whispering through the trees. Finally, she whispered, Your trap, it was meant for me. Daniel shook his head. No, he said firmly. For animals, not for you. Her lips pressed tight. She wanted to believe him. But trust was dangerous. Trust had cost her people their homes, their freedom, maybe even their lives. Still, his words carried no lie, and it unsettled her. A rustle in the bushes made her jump. Her eyes darted to the shadows. She expected hunters, claws, or worse. Her breath hitched in fear. Daniel lifted the lantern higher, showing nothing but a rabbit. Slipping away into the dark, she exhaled shakily, realizing how fragile her body had become. Daniel saw her trembling and sighed. He took off his coat and laid it on the ground. You can rest here, he said. His voice was gentle but firm. "You're too weak to run tonight." Her mind screamed to refuse, to escape, to disappear into the forest. But her body betrayed her. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the ground near the coat. She did not lie on it, but she sat beside it, her eyes never leaving him, ready to leap if he moved wrong. Daniel settled down a short distance away. He leaned against a tree, his lantern glowing softly beside him. He closed his eyes, not sleeping, just resting, showing her he would not attack. The alien woman stared at him, confused. Why was he not tying her? Why was he not calling others? Why did he sit so calmly? His actions twisted the stories she knew about humans, and that frightened her more than chains ever could. Her heart raced, her thoughts heavy. In the silence, she whispered softly to herself in her own language, words he could not understand. They were words of doubt, of fear, and maybe a tiny spark of hope. The forest sang its night song around them, but between the human and the alien woman, another song was beginning, a silent one, woven of mistrust and tiny threads of uncertain trust. And as the night deepened, both of them knew one truth. They were strangers bound by accident, but what happened next would decide if they became enemies, or something else entirely. The silent night. The forest grew darker as the night deepened. The fireflies glowed faintly among the trees, and the sound of distant owls echoed through the woods. Daniel sat leaning against the tree, his lantern dim but steady. Across from him, the alien woman sat with her back to a rock, her eyes glowing. Faintly in the shadows, she held herself tightly, as if her own arms were the only shield she had left. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken fear and doubt. Daniel could feel her gaze on him every few moments, sharp, suspicious, but also filled with exhaustion. He didn't move closer, didn't try to push her. He knew if he did, she might flee or attack, and both would end badly. So he stayed still, letting the night speak for them. The alien woman's breathing was uneven. Her body ached from running, hiding, and now the trap. She had expected cruelty from this human, yet here she was, still alive, still free, and even with water in her body. That thought made her uneasy. She whispered softly in her own tongue, words he couldn't understand. But Daniel noticed the sorrow in her voice. Daniel turned his eyes to the sky above the tree line. The stars stretched endlessly, bright and scattered. He wondered if some of those stars were her home, if she had family waiting for her there. The thought pressed on his chest. He knew what it felt like to lose people, to have no one waiting for you, and he could see the same emptiness in her eyes. At last, she broke the silence. "Why no chain?" she asked softly. Her voice carried confusion more than curiosity. "Why no cage?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned his head toward her slowly. "Because you are not an animal," he said simply. His voice was steady, almost flat, but it carried weight. Her glowing eyes flickered. She looked away quickly, pressing her knees to her chest. No human had ever spoken to her like that. Every time she had seen humans before, there were cages, guns, collars. But this one was different, and difference was terrifying. The night grew colder. A sharp wind ran through the trees. Daniel reached for a small piece of wood and lit a small fire near him. The glow pushed back the shadows, warming the air. He didn't invite her closer, but he noticed her eyes follow the flames. Her body shook with cold, but her pride kept her from moving. Finally, Daniel sighed. He tossed his coat gently across the ground toward her. "You'll freeze," he muttered. She stared at it. Unmoving, he added, "Take it or don't, it's up to you." Her hands trembled. After a long pause, she reached out and pulled the coat toward herself. The fabric was rough but warm. She wrapped it around her shoulders, her glowing eyes lowering. She did not thank him, but Daniel didn't expect thanks. He simply leaned back and closed his eyes again. The fire cracked softly, and the forest sang its quiet song. Little by little, the alien woman's body began to relax, not because she trusted him, but because exhaustion was stronger than fear. Her eyelids grew heavy, Her mind still warned her of danger, but her body betrayed her. Within moments, she was half asleep, curled under his coat. Daniel opened his eyes slightly, watching her. He could see the rise and fall of her chest, the way her claws rested loosely against the ground. He knew she didn't trust him, maybe never would, but at least for now she was safe. He turned his gaze back to the fire, letting the crackling flames keep him awake. Hours passed slowly. The night was endless. But Daniel kept watch. Somewhere deep in the woods, a branch cracked. His body stiffened. His hand moved toward his knife. He listened carefully, waiting. A shadow moved between the trees, too tall for an animal. His heart pounded, but he stayed still. The alien woman stirred in her half-sleep. Her glowing eyes opened slightly. She noticed his posture and whispered faintly, "Hunters." Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't reply, but he kept his eyes on the dark forest. The sound faded away, leaving only silence again. Whoever it was, they were gone for now. Still, the tension remained heavy. Both of them knew danger was near. When the forest fell quiet again, the alien woman whispered, "You? Why protect me?" Her voice was weak, but her words carried the weight of suspicion. Daniel exhaled slowly. His eyes stayed on the fire. "Because no one deserves to live in fear," he said. His voice was low, almost like he was speaking to himself. She stared at him, confused. His answer did not fit the stories she knew. Humans were hunters, killers, conquerors, but his words carried no lie, no trick, only truth. That truth unsettled her more than a blade. The fire burned low as the night reached its deepest hour. She finally closed her eyes again, letting exhaustion take her fully. Daniel kept guard, his body heavy but his mind sharp. Somewhere inside him, he knew his life had just changed. He didn't catch an alien in his trap by accident. It felt like fate. And in the silence of that night, under the watch of the stars, two strangers, one human, one alien, shared something fragile and rare. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something that could one day become it. The broken truth. Morning light crept slowly into the forest. The trees glowed golden as the sun broke through the leaves. Daniel stirred awake, stiff from sitting against the tree all night. The small fire had burned down to ashes, only smoke rising weakly. Across from him, the alien woman was already awake. Her glowing eyes scanned the woods sharply as if danger might step out at any second. Daniel watched her carefully. She still wore his coat, but her arms were crossed tight. Her body language said she was ready to run. He didn't speak at once. Instead, he pulled a small piece of bread from his pack and placed it on a rock between them. Then he leaned back and said, "Eat if you want." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. Her people had warned her that humans always tried to control others with food, but her stomach betrayed her, growling so loudly that Daniel could hear it. She snatched the bread, sniffed it, then tore a small bite. The taste was plain but filling. She ate quickly, never looking away from him. Daniel didn't smile. He knew trust was a mountain, not a path. He would not climb it in a single day. After a while, the alien woman spoke. Her voice was soft but edged with pain. "Your trap. It almost broke my arm," she said. She rubbed her wrist gently. Her words were not angry, but heavy, as if she carried more than one truth. Daniel nodded. "It was never meant for you," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "It was for animals. I didn't know anyone like you was out here." She stared at him, her glowing eyes sharp. "You don't know," she whispered bitterly. "Humans always know. Humans hunt us, humans sell us, humans—" She stopped, her voice breaking. Her hands trembled as she pulled the coat tighter around her body. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Who hunts you?" he asked gently, her lips pressed tight. Her throat worked as if the words hurt. Finally, she whispered, "Others. Not from your kind, not always, but sometimes humans too." Her voice grew weaker. "We were forced to flee. My people were scattered, some captured, some killed, some still hiding. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He thought of his own past, of war and loss. He knew what it meant to lose family, he said quietly. And you're alone. The alien nodded once quickly, like admitting it was shameful. Alone, she whispered, her voice cracked. For the first time, Daniel saw her as more than a stranger, more than an alien. She was broken, carrying wounds far deeper than the cuts on her skin. He wanted to reach out, but he didn't. He only spoke. I'm sorry. She looked at him sharply, her glowing eyes narrowed. Sorry, she echoed. Humans never say sorry, they only take. Daniel shook his head. Not me, he said firmly. I didn't ask for you to be in that trap. I didn't want this. But now you're here, I won't hurt you. Silence fell again. The forest. Birds sang lightly in the morning, but the air between them was heavy. She hugged her knees, staring at him like she wanted to believe. But every memory warned her not to. Her voice was almost a whisper when she said, Do you know what humans did to my sister? Daniel froze. His eyes met hers. What happened? He asked softly. Her lips trembled. She shook her head, her glowing eyes wet with unshed tears. They chained her. They dragged her to their market. They sold her like an object. She was never seen again. Her voice broke and the words spilled like a wound reopening. She screamed for me. I couldn't save her. Daniel's chest felt heavy. He had seen men do cruel things in his world, too. He clenched his fists, anger rising, not at her, but at the thought of such cruelty. He said quietly, That wasn't me. That won't ever be me. The alien woman closed her eyes tightly. Her body shook as if the memory was still alive in her mind. She whispered, But you're human. You are the same as them. Daniel's voice was low but sharp. No, he said. I may be human, but I choose my own actions. I choose who I am, and I choose not to harm you. The alien looked at him, startled by the fire in his voice. He wasn't lying. He wasn't pretending. His words carried a truth she had never heard from any other human. Her breathing slowed, though mistrust still lingered in her eyes. If not cage, if not chain, then what do you want? She asked cautiously. Daniel paused. He didn't know what answer she expected, but he gave the only one he had. Nothing, he said. I only want you safe. She frowned deeply. That word safe felt strange, foreign, even dangerous. Could a human really mean it? Or was it another trick? Her mind screamed at her not to believe, but her heart trembled, pulling her in two directions. The forest shifted again. A sound of distant footsteps echoed faintly. Both Daniel and the alien woman froze. Daniel's hand moved to his knife. The alien's body stiffened, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. They're coming, she whispered. Her voice was filled with dread. The hunters. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He stood slowly, scanning the trees. He could hear faint voices carried by the wind. Whoever was out there, they were moving closer. He turned to her, his voice firm. Stay close to me. Her lips parted, shock flashing across her face. You would fight them? She asked in disbelief. Daniel nodded once, his eyes steady. If I must, he said. His hand tightened on the knife, his body tense like stone. The alien woman stared at him, caught between fear and something she didn't want to name, trust. The broken truth had been spoken. Her past was filled with chains and betrayal, but here stood a human who chose differently. And now, danger was closing in, and they both knew. The next choice could decide if either of them survived. The hunters arrive. The voices grew louder in the forest, carried by the wind like a warning. Daniel stood still, every muscle tense. His hand gripped the knife at his belt. His eyes scanned the trees, searching for movement. The alien woman crouched low, her glowing eyes wide with panic. She whispered again, Hunters! Her voice trembling like a broken string. Daniel leaned, close, his voice low but steady. Stay quiet, stay behind me. She wanted to protest, to tell him she could protect herself, but her body betrayed her. She was weak, still bleeding, and her legs shook under her. All she could do was obey. The crunch of boots on leaves drew nearer. Then shadows appeared between the trees. 3 men stepped into the clearing. Their faces were rough, their clothes torn from the journey, and their weapons gleamed in the morning light. One carried a long rifle, another held chains, and the third dragged a sack filled with strange tools. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had seen men like these before, mercenaries who cared for nothing but money. Their eyes swept the forest until they landed on him. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, grinned coldly. "Hunter," he said, his voice sharp. "You've seen her, haven't you?" Daniel kept his face calm. "Seen who?" he asked evenly. His knife stayed at his side, hidden in the shadow of his leg. The man with the scar smirked. "Don't play dumb. An alien woman passed this way. Small, glowing eyes, fragile looking, worth more than you can count." He stepped closer, his boots crushing leaves. "You wouldn't hide her, would you?" Behind Daniel, the alien woman pressed herself into the shadows. Her body trembling, she wanted to run, but if she did, they would catch her instantly. Her glowing eyes darted toward Daniel, unsure if he would betray her now to save himself. Daniel met the scarred man's gaze. "I've seen nothing," he said firmly. His voice carried no hesitation. The second man stepped forward, holding up the chains. "If you have her, give her up now. It will save you trouble." His voice was rough. His eyes searched the ground, looking for tracks. Daniel's grip tightened on his knife. "There is no one here," he said again, his tone sharper this time. The scarred man narrowed his eyes. He glanced around, his suspicion growing. "Strange," he muttered. "Your fire is still warm. Your traps are nearby. You don't look like a man hunting alone." His gaze flicked toward the rocks, then the coat draped near them. His smile widened, cruel and knowing. "She's here, isn't she?" The alien woman's heart raced. She clenched her teeth, ready to spring up and run. But Daniel stepped forward, blocking the man's line of sight. His shoulders squared, his voice cold. "I said, there is no one here." The forest grew quiet. The hunters looked at one another, tension rising. The scarred man chuckled darkly. "You lie for her. Why, what is she to you? Just a creature, nothing more?" Daniel's eyes hardened. "She is not your prey," he said sharply. His voice was calm, but inside his chest, his heart pounded. The man with the chains growled. "Wrong answer." He stepped forward, raising his weapon. But before he could move further, Daniel drew his knife and stood ready. His eyes burned with defiance. "Leave," Daniel said, his voice low but steady. "There's nothing here for you." The 3 hunters froze for a moment, surprised by his courage. Then the scarred man sneered. "You'll regret this." He waved his hand and the others pulled back slightly. "We'll be watching you. Hunter, if we catch her with you, we'll kill you both." With that, they turned, their boots crunching on the leaves as they vanished back into the trees. Their voices echoed faintly, promising they would return. Promising that this wasn't. Over the silence that followed was heavy. Daniel stood still, knife in hand, his body tense. Only when the sound of footsteps faded completely did he lower the blade. He turned slowly to the alien woman who was still crouched, her face pale. "You lied," she whispered in disbelief. Her voice shook. "You risked your life for me." Daniel nodded once. "I won't hand you over," he said simply. His voice carried no hesitation, no second thought. Her eyes glistened faintly, glowing brighter with emotion. "But why?" she asked. Her voice was fragile, as if the answer mattered more than anything else. Daniel took a deep breath. His gaze drifted to the path where the hunters had vanished. "Because they see you as less," he said quietly. "But I don't. You're not an animal, not property. You're someone who deserves to live free." The alien woman stared at him, her lips trembling. She wanted to deny it, to call him a liar, but his words struck deep. Her heart throbbed with a pain she didn't understand. Fear and hope clashed inside her like 2 storms. Daniel stepped closer, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. "They'll be back," he said, his voice calm but heavy. We can't stay here. It's not safe anymore. Her body tensed. You mean, escape? She whispered. Her voice carried both fear and fragile hope. Yes, Daniel said firmly. We'll move through the forest, away from their patrols. If we reach the mountains, you'll be safe. She stared at him, her breath catching. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever risked anything for her. And yet here was a human offering freedom instead of chains. The sun climbed higher, shining between the trees. The forest looked calm again. But both of them knew the truth. The hunters were not gone. They would return, stronger, more dangerous. For now, though, the alien woman pulled his coat tighter around herself and whispered, I don't understand you, human. Daniel gave a faint smile, tired but determined. You don't have to, he said. Just know I won't let them take you. The bond between them was still fragile, built from fear and chance, but in that moment something shifted. She no longer looked at him only with suspicion, but with the smallest spark of trust. And as they prepared to leave the clearing, the forest felt different. The hunt was no longer only for her survival. It was now a battle they would face together, the escape plan. The forest was quiet again, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of silence that came before danger returned. Daniel packed his small bag quickly, gathering the little food he had left. The alien woman stood close by, watching him with sharp, glowing eyes. Her body was still weak, but her spirit seemed stronger now. She knew the hunters would not give up, and neither could she. Daniel handed her a strip of dried meat. Eat, you'll need strength, he said. She hesitated for a moment, then took it, chewing slowly. Her stomach ached with hunger, but her mind kept circling the same question. Why was this human helping her? When the fire was gone and the ground was covered, Daniel lifted his pack. We'll move before the sun rises higher, he said. His voice was steady but urgent. The hunters will return. They'll search every trap, every path. We can't stay here. The alien hugged his coat tighter around her shoulders. Her voice was soft but edged with fear. Where will we go? Daniel pointed toward the distant mountains. Their snowy peaks rose faintly beyond the trees. Up there, he said. Caves, valleys. They won't follow far into those cliffs. Too dangerous, too wild. Her glowing eyes widened. Dangerous, she repeated. Her voice trembled. Then why go? Daniel looked at her firmly. Because it's the only place you'll be safe, he said. His words carried certainty, though he knew the road would not be easy. They began to move, Daniel leading the way through narrow paths covered in roots and vines. The forest air grew colder as the trees thickened. The alien woman walked behind him, her steps uncertain, every sound in the woods making her flinch. But each time she faltered, Daniel slowed, making sure she did not fall behind. At one point, she stumbled, her legs too weak to hold her. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground. Her body tensed instantly, expecting harm. But Daniel only lifted her gently, setting her back on her feet. Careful, he said softly. She stared at him, breathless, confused again by his touch, gentle, not cruel. The path grew steeper, forcing them to cross a shallow stream. The water was freezing, rushing over rocks. The alien woman hesitated at the edge, her body trembling. Daniel waded in first, holding out his hand. Come on, I've got you, he said. Her pride burned. She wanted to refuse, but the current looked strong. With slow steps, she reached out, her hand brushing his. For a heartbeat, her glowing eyes met his human gaze. Then she let him guide her across. When they reached the other side, she pulled her hand away quickly, clutching it to her chest. The promise of tomorrow. The cave was dark and quiet, only the soft crackle of fire filling the silence. Daniel sat with his back against the stone, his eyes half closed but alert. Across from him, the alien woman lay curled under his coat, her glowing eyes dim as she fought against sleep. For the first time in days, she was not running, not bleeding, not chained. Yet her heart could not rest. She kept glancing at him, expecting at any moment he would reveal some hidden plan, that his kindness was only a trap waiting to close. But Daniel did not move. He kept his distance, letting her breathe, letting her choose. He knew trust could not be forced, it had to grow. Hours passed until at last the alien woman whispered into the quiet, "When the hunters return, you will die because of me." Daniel opened his eyes, steady and calm. "Maybe," he said, his voice low, "but if I leave you, you will die alone, that is worse." Her chest tightened. Her glowing eyes shimmered with something she did not want to name. "Why?" she asked again, her voice breaking softly. "Why risk everything for me?" Daniel leaned forward, resting, his hands on his knees. His face was tired, but his eyes steady. "Because no one should live in chains," he said simply. "Not human, not alien, not anyone." Her breath caught. She turned her face away quickly, but her heart trembled. His words cut through the wall she had built around herself. For years she had only known fear, betrayal, and pain. Now this human spoke words that made her wonder if hope could still exist. The fire burned lower as night faded. Dawn's light began to slip into the cave, painting the stone walls with pale gold. Daniel rose slowly, stretching his stiff limbs. "We move now," he said, before the hunters circled back. The alien woman stood carefully, her body still sore but stronger than before. She followed him out of the cave, the cold mountain air biting her skin. The path was steep, rocks sharp underfoot, yet she pressed on, step by step, as they climbed higher. The forest below faded into mist. The world felt wider, quieter. Her glowing eyes widened as she gazed at the mountains stretching endlessly before her. For the first time in a long time, she felt distance between herself and those who hunted her. But peace did not last long. A shout echoed faintly from below. Daniel's eyes snapped toward the sound. On the far ridge, shadows moved. Dark figures. Climbing fast, the hunters had found their trail. "Run," Daniel said sharply, taking her hand before she could protest. They pushed forward, their boots slipping on loose stone. Her heart pounded, fear clawing at her chest. She stumbled, but Daniel pulled her back to her feet without slowing. The hunters' voices grew louder, closer. Chains clinked, rifles glinted in the morning light. The alien woman's breath hitched. "They'll catch us," she gasped. "Not if I can help it," Daniel growled. His grip on her hand tightened. He pulled her up a narrow path, sharp rocks cutting his arms, but he didn't let go. Finally, they reached a wide ledge overlooking a valley. The hunters were close, their footsteps pounding against stone. Daniel turned quickly, scanning the ledge. He spotted a hidden crevice in the rock, just wide enough for her. "Go," he said, pushing her toward it. "Hide. I'll hold them." "Off!" Her eyes widened in shock. "No," she whispered. "If you stay, they'll kill you." Daniel shook his head firmly. "If I don't, they'll take you. I won't let that happen." Her glowing eyes filled with tears she had not expected. She grabbed his arm desperately. "Why?" she cried, her voice breaking. "Why would you die for me?" Daniel looked at her, his voice steady even as danger closed in. "Because you feared me when we met, and I want you to leave this world knowing not all humans deserve your fear." Her lips trembled, her heart torn in two. Before she could answer, the hunters appeared, rifles raised, chains clattering. The scarred leader grinned cruelly. "You should have sold her, Hunter," he sneered. "Now you both die." Daniel stepped forward, knife in hand, his body tense, his eyes fierce. The alien woman clutched the rock, tears burning her eyes. She had seen humans harm, destroy, enslave, but never protect, never like this. The hunters advanced, but Daniel did not step back. His voice rang out sharp. "You won't take her." Time slowed. The alien woman's chest heaved, her mind screamed to stay hidden, but her heart moved faster than her fear. She stepped out from the crevice, standing beside Daniel. Her glowing eyes burned bright. "If he dies, I die too," she declared. The hunters froze. Surprised by her defiance, Daniel's eyes widened slightly, but pride flickered inside him. In that moment, she had chosen not to hide. The scarred man snarled, raising his rifle. But before he could fire, the mountains rumbled. A rock slide thundered, down from above, sending boulders crashing across the hunter's path. Dust filled the air, and the men shouted in panic, scrambling to escape. When the dust cleared, the ridge below was broken. The hunters trapped on the other side. Their voices faded as they retreated, swearing they would return. Breathing hard, Daniel lowered his knife. The alien woman leaned against the rock, her chest rising and falling fast. For a moment, silence held them. Then she turned to him. Her voice trembling. "You kept your word, you didn't hand me over, you didn't let them take me." Daniel nodded, his voice soft. "I told you I wouldn't." She hesitated, then placed her hand gently against his chest. Her glowing eyes glistened. "I feared you," she whispered. "But now I trust you." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time since his family was gone, he felt something stir in his heart. Not just duty, not just survival, but connection, fragile yet powerful. The two of them stood together on the ridge, the morning sun rising over the mountains. The danger was not gone. The hunters would return one day, but in that moment they had won. And as the alien woman turned to the misty valley ahead, she whispered softly, "Tomorrow will be different." Daniel followed her gaze, his voice quiet but certain. Yes, tomorrow. And so the promise of tomorrow was made, not in words of war or chains of fear, but in the fragile bond between a human and an alien, forged in a forest, carried through fire, and sealed with trust.